All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Powerline Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Ryan Lucas. Thanks for being here. This week's guest I wanted to get him on the show for a long time. He's a country music singer-songwriter, happens to be a lineman. He writes really fantastic stuff about the trades. He gets into how he kind of come up with this idea to write music for our industry specifically, gets into that in the pod. So can't wait to get this one out to you guys, but super stoked. I first listened to Clint Vick's music back in barehand class. Had a couple of the fellas that I was staying with were like, you gotta listen to this guy's stuff. That was the first time I listened to it. I've been wanting to get him on the show ever since. So thanks to his son for connecting us. On our way in here, we're just gonna listen to a clip from one of Clint's songs.
But you see, I am a lineman, and I build power lines. And of all the men in this world, there only are two kinds. There's guys like me who climb the towers or stick our hooks in wood. Guys like you and all your friends who only wish they could.
All right, Clint. Thank you for taking time out of your day and joining me on the show. I first heard your music, heard about you a couple years ago now in barehand class down at the Lazy Q Ranch in Texas. I was doing barehand class there for the second time, going to be an instructor, and a couple of the boys that were staying with me were like, hey, you gotta listen to this. You gotta listen to this. And I was like, wow, this is dope. And I had the podcast going back then. And since then, I've been wanting to connect with you. So I'm stoked that your kid made the connection work and that you took time to jump on. So welcome to the show.
Heck yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's cool. It's going to be awesome. But some of my buddies are going to hear that you mentioned barehand right off the bat. And they're going to say, oh, boy, he's met his man. That's for sure.
Yeah. You like that barehand world?
I did some barehand, and then I got to the point where I would brag about these guys I was working with Wilson. And so we'd get a new apprentice on the crew or something, and I'd say, it wouldn't be very long. I'd say, hey, go tell Drew, ask him if he knew that I was a barehander. And we'd walk over there and say, did you know Clay was a barehander? And he'd be like, oh my God, is that the first thing he says to everybody?
That's awesome. I love it. I first did, first barehand training course was back in 2013 with Quant Services, and I spent a good 5 years on some 500 kV in British Columbia, and then went into some management and kind of let the barehand certification lapse after that, until a couple years ago went back to kind of do some instructing with it and had to redo the course. So yeah, that's when I first heard your tunes and heard about you. That's cool. That's dope. I didn't know you were
I've been down to the Lazy Q myself. Down there, we were doing. They were going to make me a helicopter trainer of some kind, but I never finished it. But yeah.
So I like to start these kind of like almost chronological. Start off like where you're from, even in the beginning, like where you're originally from. So where are you from? Talk to me a little bit about what part of the world you come from.
Well, I grew up on a ranch in Montana. But we had a lot of family in Missouri, so it was like we were always between Montana and the Kansas City area and the southwest Missouri around the Joplin area. I had family. So I left home I grew up in a little town of Phillipsburg. It's about 1,000 people. We had 100 people in our high school. It's a little tiny town. And then I left as soon as I graduated and got into concrete, came back, did some more ranch work, went back, did concrete, and that's about it. And now I live in Spokane now, but traveled all over since then. That was a long time ago.
So it was your family that was into ranching?
Yeah, my dad and grandfather left Missouri when I was about 5 and bought a cattle ranch in Montana. So
just living the Yellowstone dream.
Yeah, a long time. I think 75 is when that happened. It was a long time ago. When the interest rates were about as high as your credit card right now. So, yeah, and then Dad was a pipe fitter. So as they were slowly losing the ranch. that it wasn't a good deal for him. It was a tough time during those years. So Dad became a pipe fitter, and we traveled around with him quite a bit when I was in 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. It's kind of like being a tramp lineman. And then by 7th grade, he realized that he couldn't take 6 kids on the road everywhere he went. So we moved our trailer out to the summer pasture where we used to have the cows, because he'd sold off a big portion of the home ranch. So we had like, I don't know, I was like 1,200 acres that backed up Forest Service, that backed up wilderness area. And we could ride a horse for days and not see anybody. And that's where I went from 7th grade till I graduated. So great place to grow up.
Dang. I always, I ask people that come from I come from a small town myself, second generation lineman. So I kind of grew up around line work and linemen. Never really what I wanted to be when I grew up, like going through school is never really what I wanted to be. No interest in it till somebody kind of smacked me on the head and said, why don't you give it a go? Your dad owns a company. It's an easy in for you. So I thought about it and went into it after that. But like, often wonder about that connection between the ranch, like ranch hands, and that farmer kid, you know, kind of. For us, it was like a heavy like logging forestry community. So sawmills, forest, like logging, crazy hours, you know, not afraid of hard work, like that sort of thing was kind of like this community that I grew up in. It was a logging forestry community as well as a mining community. So we got a lot of like friends of mine that I grew up with actually ended up in the line trade because they come out of the forest industry or the mining industry, or ended up in electrical of some sort, whether it was an electrician or line work. And it always seemed to make like a good fit for line work. Like,
yeah, I got an apprenticeship in Kansas City, and I actually had one of my trainers tell me that. He goes, you got an agricultural background, you're going to do fine in this. And I think that's true. Well, you start driving tractors at 5 years old. I mean, you know, you're going to be a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's got lots to do with it. Like, not that I've seen it the other way around too. Like inner city kids become good hands as well. It's just different. But
yeah, and I think they probably have to, when they do become good hands, I think they probably accomplished more because they had they didn't have the big truck background. And, you know, I can still hear the foreman on the ranch screaming, you know, use your damn mirror when you're backing up. Don't stick your head out. And, you know, so I think the driving and learn how to swing a hammer, you know, how to use a wrench, some of that stuff we take for granted is new to a lot of those people. So
I got into, like, when I was at the Lazy Q, I was going to do some barehand training, but ended up working more with pre-apprentices at their pre-apprentice school there. And you mentioned swinging a hammer. It's kind of funny seeing, you know, 50 to 75 kids show up. I call them kids, but they're, you know, 20 something years old, and they're all choked up on a hammer, like punching a staple into the pole instead of swinging it. It's true though. It's amazing how many people just like, I had this one kid, he was scared of heights. His father was a lineman, kind of pushed him into it. And it was like his first time getting on a pole was actually at the school. So we get him his hooks, get him on the pole, and he's just frozen at like 6 feet. Like his feet were at 6 feet, just frozen. So I threw my gear on and I got up there with him and I'm like, yo, Davey, like, how's it going? Like, what's up? What's going through your head? He's like, I don't know if I can do it. I'm like, but I think he was 18 or 19 years old. I'm like, dude, have you ever been on a ladder before? You know? He's like, no, sir. I'm like, you never been on a roof, cleaned gutters? Like, no, sir.
Nothing.
I'm like, dude, well, it's, you know, 30 more feet to the top of this pole, and Big John is 120 feet. And that's part of your climbing cert is to get to the top of that one. I'm like, do you think you got it in you? And he's like, no, sir. That was his last day. But it's amazing how many people just, I haven't even.
I was scared. I was terrified of heights, but I like being terrified. So I've got that going for me.
Interesting. So you moved west. What brought you west?
Recently, you mean, or when I was younger?
Was it recent that you moved to Spokane?
No, I've been back. I came back home after I left. I graduated, and it's just hard to make it work in a small town in Montana. I wanted to be home so bad, but there was never anything I could do to live there. You know, being a ranch hand and selling your soul to the ranch wasn't a long-term solution anyway, you know. But once I turned out, I turned out in Kansas City Power and Light is where I went through my apprenticeship. And then I was like, now I've got my ticket. You know, I worked in Kansas City for, I think, 4 years before I transferred to Butte and got in the Northwestern Energy up there in Butte, Montana. So.
Oh, wow. Do you know Susan Blazer?
Yes. In Kansas City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had her on the show quite a while back, about a year and a half ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
That's a name I have not heard in a while.
Yeah. She actually just, was it last year before last? Maybe it was year before last, inducted into the Lineman Hall of Fame, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's very cool.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what capacity she had. I think she might have actually taught some of our transformer classes or something, if I remember right. But
I think she's a trainer. I think she's a trainer now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to get her back on. How did you come across line work? How did you find line work?
So I was doing basements in Southwest Missouri and in the Ozarks. I mean, Hickville. And they introduced me to this guy. My cousin introduced me to this guy, and just as redneck as you could ever hope to imagine. And I didn't even know what a lineman was. I thought a lineman was somebody on the railroad. I had no idea. And at this time, I think I'm probably 25 or 26. And he went through the apprenticeship and came out. He's like, "You've got to do this. This is what you got to do." And I don't remember if he was clear through or not, but he taught me how to climb. He lived out in the country, and he killed the line and grounded it, and I'd go up and take it all down and put it back up. And so he got me an interview. I was going to be a warehouse guy because I got to get my foot in the door. Okay. So he brought me a big tub full of pole top pins and bolts and lags and everything. I tried to memorize the name of all this stuff, and I was climbing on my own around. I wasn't going high. I was just going around the pole. We met his boss in a county fair late at night, and he's like, "This is the guy that's going to interview for that warehouse job." He says, "I want him to climb for you." So we walked over to the little pole there, and I put my hooks on and climbed at the fair. All I remember is there's a bunch of flies around the light. And I ended up, got the interview, and then they decided not to fill the position. So it was years later before I was driving over the road truck in Kansas City when Kansas City put on a job fair. And that's how I got in. I think it was maybe 12 years later. Before I got in.
What kept you persistent with doing it?
Well, I wasn't really. I'd kind of given up on it, but I was working at a chemical plant, and this guy was, "Didn't you tell me you climbed poles one time?" And then I said, "Yeah, that was a long time ago." He goes, "Well, they're having a fair or a job fair." That's about the time I switched over the road trucking, and I happened to be home, and I thought, well, I'll go for it. There was going to be a million people there. I didn't have a chance in the world, but a guy from Park that I knew took me down there and introduced me. And I think that had a lot to do with getting on there. So that's how it started.
I talk to people. I get this online all the time about, like, I get comments like, nobody's hiring me. I've tried to apply. I tried to get in. I can't get a job. This trade seems silly. Like, you got to know somebody to get in. And then I just keep firing back with, you have to be persistent, like comments like that. Like, you got to be really persistent. You have to try every avenue possible. You have to be willing to leave your town, leave your state, leave your country, like go out and sell yourself and try to get your foot in the door somewhere, somehow. I've had this guy, this lineman, Ben Holmes, on the show a couple times. He was living in California. He's from California. He was in Texas. I think he was at the International Lineman Rodeo in Texas. He was trying to get in the door. He met a union rep from Local 66 in Texas. And the guy was like, "We have an opening. If you can be here by Tuesday, I can get you in." And this was like Saturday at the rodeo. He flew back Sunday, got in a car Monday, drove all the way from California to Texas, and now it's spent the next, several years in Texas. Like, that's what it takes sometimes.
That's exactly what it takes. When I got in, I don't think that in this is like 2004 when I got an apprenticeship, and I don't think at that time, and I could be wrong, just what I was exposed to, but I don't think there was a lot of lineman schools going on at that time.
Yeah.
And I know Kansas City Powered Light was having an issue because they would hire these apprentices off the street, they'd induct them into the union, and then they'd find out several weeks later that they were scared of heights and that the union wouldn't let them get rid of them. So they worked out this deal called a pre-apprenticeship, and they hired somewhere around in the neighborhood of 30 of us in July in Kansas City, and they spent 6 weeks trying to make us quit. It was like a cross between like boot camp and football practice, you know.
Yeah.
They could have beat me every day. I wasn't going anywhere.
That's what I like about, so like, that's another thing, another comment I see so much like floating around social media. And thank God for 24-hour news updates on social. But these comments about line school, and it's mostly from the older generation that signed up for the line trade by just going to the hall, signing in, going as a groundman, putting their time in, getting an apprenticeship and going through. And they keep saying things like, oh, you don't need the line school. It's a waste of money. It's this, it's that. And I just keep rebuttaling with whatever gets you in the door, do that thing.
Exactly.
Just do the fucking thing that gets you in the door. If it's line school,
the fastest.
It's pretty inexpensive education, you know, grand scheme of things. You're going to pay back your 20 grand in the first year if you're smart. Like,
you could do that in a storm month.
Dude, like seriously.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just don't get it. And it's not that easy for everybody to just like go. And so I had Kane, she's a female lineman from the East Coast of Canada, had her on the pod a couple weeks ago. And she remembers, like, you know, cause up here in Canada, you're on social media, you're looking at everything that Americans are doing as far as like, oh, you just go sign the books, you know, like, well, that doesn't exist up here. As you know, you've worked up here. Like, it's pretty, it's a different sort of a system. We have, you know, I'm an IBW member myself, that kind of thing. There's a book system in British Columbia, but there's not a book system in the whole middle part of the country. You know, maybe there's a little bit in Ontario and a little bit on the East Coast, but it's not like it is in the US. So yeah, it's tough, right? You can't just go sign up and, you know, next thing you know, you're in an apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so thankful for it though. I always joke, you know, a guy as dumb as me can make this kind of money and it's been a blessing and an adventure. Holy cow, it's been an adventure. But
talk about that adventure a little bit. Where have you been?
I got married to my high school girlfriend, wife number 3. So I wound up where typical lineman story. And I was working in Butte, and she was having travel all the way to Spokane over a couple mountain passes twice a month with the kids to their dad. And they're up here there because, you know, the mountain passes can get scary in the wintertime. And I said, you know, if I quit this job, this utility, and just go on the road, we can live wherever we want. And so I went, we moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and we had a blast that month I was off. We spent money like it was going out of style. And come towards the end of August, I realized I was going to have to do something. And I got on the internet. Wilson was working in Canada. They were hiring people. So I called, not knowing anything about being a trap lineman, nothing. And I said, how are you going to build towers up there in the winter? And he's like, oh, we're gonna put a tent up. There'll be a heater. It'll be nice in there. Well, that was either a lie or it didn't come true. I don't know what that was, but they said, well, it takes a while for the paperwork to go through. So they sent me down to Big Spring, Texas, and it was end of August, and I was putting ice in my shirt pockets. I thought I was going to die. And so like 6 weeks later, I drove my truck from South Texas to Calgary, and there was, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet of snow, and it was way below zero. Like when I got out of the truck, and I worked 2 winters up there. I worked 15 months straight on that line. Boy, met a lot of good linemen up there. Still friends with some of them. Still, Corey Meyer still checks in with me, or every 4th of July he shoots me a text. So
very cool. I recognize that name. I did the complete opposite. I was working in northern Alberta up near Fort McMurray, building a 240 kV transmission line, steel lattice towers. I remember minus 42 every day for the month of January and February. You leave your trucks running 24/7.
Yep.
You never shut them off. With the newer trucks, you had to go burn the coal out of them.
Yeah,
they'd let
when
you.
it got so cold,
They'd pay people to come in just to run the trucks up and down the highway there for a while.
Yep.
I never did see it myself, but there was a guy when I was working up there that claimed that the whiskey in his truck froze. I don't know if that's true, but it was cold.
I wouldn't freaking doubt it. I remember sleeping in my hoodie in a sleeping bag with covers over in this shitty little camp in Conklin, Alberta. And I got a phone call. I come down from the tower. We're pinning a wing. I come down off the tower. I got in the truck for lunch. It's kind of stripped down. I got this phone call. It was my the recruiting boss, and he was like, "Ryan, we need a barehand guy. We need a couple barehand guys in South Texas." And I was like, "South Texas, hey? What's the temperature?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think it's warm. I don't know what it is, but I think it's warm." I'm like, "Done. When do you need me?" "Next week." "Okay." Went out to the boss and I was like, "I gotta go, boys. They need me in South Texas." Rolled up in South Texas a week later and it was like a balmy 95 or something. I was like, sweet. Yeah, minus 45 to 95.
Probably a little better of a change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cold. I remember we had 15-ton hoist that they were putting torches on to keep them from freezing. And I don't know if it was affecting the metal, but some of them were snapping and eating out. And like, holy cow. It didn't happen to me, but I can't imagine the force of a 15-ton hoist giving out.
No.
Just letting her eat.
We had some scenarios too, like where like steel, like guy wire was snapping, we're pulling static line and your Kellum grip would break just because it was not designed for that.
Yeah. Nothing is designed for that.
No.
And that's where I got into helicopters with Wilson there. And that had always been, I just looked at those linemen. It was back before YouTube, but I was like, there's linemen out there flying around on helicopters. And I just wanted to do that so bad. And we stacked towers and stacked towers for months and months and months. We stacked towers. And I didn't know for sure if I was going to get on the wire crew when they started pulling or if I'd stay stacking towers, but I managed to get on the wire crew and they were going to train us. We were going to fly on the skid and land on the top of a framer. And I couldn't even sleep. I was so excited. It didn't get old for a long time. It finally got more mundane. I don't know if it ever got old, but man, we did thousands of skid transfers on that job.
So amazing. That's similar. I was part of a group that started using long lines in Canada for actual work, like until this time in, I think it was like 2012, 13, 14, long line in humans in Canada had only been done for like search and rescue or stuff like that, right? It had never been like a work practice. So I was working for Alltech at the time, and they worked with Transport Canada and the Department of Transportation or whatever, and they figured out a way to long line us. Anyway, it started long lining us into 500 kV energized, and it just became hundreds of thousands of rotations of this, right? They pick you up at a site, pick you up. It's so cool. Like, I try to explain this to people, like the best ride at Disneyland, it doesn't compare to anything like this. Like hanging on the bottom of a rope, looking up 100 feet, you're 1,000 feet off the ground and you're just like flying through the air, and then drop you on energized 500, and then you get in a little cart and you ride that cart down the wire all day long. They're like, what are you talking about? But it is the coolest shit, right?
One of the guys in Canada, we were talking about some movie star or something, and he's like, why would I want to see him? Because we were doing implodes on that job too. So there's explosions going off everywhere, I hang from helicopters and there's bombs going off all around me. I do the real shit,
That's facts, though. That's facts. That's so cool. So explain a little bit more about your helicopter experience. Like, obviously this was something you've spent some time doing.
Yeah, I think I stuck with Wilson. Somebody's going to listen to this and say it wasn't that long, but I want to say it was 6 or 7 years that I stuck with them. And I felt like we were part of a group that could throw some wire in the air. I worked with a bunch of really good dudes on that, with that company. We went, as far as Rhode Island, all over California and Oregon and Washington. I followed him to Minnesota. I think that's where we parted ways, was in Minnesota. I had enough of that. No, I could sense another Canada winter coming. But
Totally.
did that, and I think the last time I was on a helicopter was over the San Francisco Bay. I was sitting in a chair with this guy that I didn't even know him. I had just met him, and we were putting patch rod on this wire that we were going to be pulling out. We were pulling wire with wire, and the wire was shot everywhere. There was a spacer. It almost rubbed a hole through it, and so we had this, I don't know, 8 or 9 foot patch rod we were putting on, and right over the ocean. And somehow the pilot, he said that he spun around. We were long lining, and all of a sudden he's coming up, and he's got us trapped underneath the midspan, and he just keeps coming up and just keeps coming up. And finally we shot out of there and did this huge circle out over the water and lost all of our armor rod in the ocean. And so you don't say things on the radio, but you're like, what the heck, So I was like, well, you're gonna have to take us back. And so it's like, I think it was like 5 miles back to where we were landing. I got out, and it's like, what in the world happened? And he's like, wind caught me and I was completely spun around. I didn't know. And I don't know if he was telling the truth or not. So we loaded up and we headed back out there, and got to doing it again. And this time he got our heads under. Both of our helmets were under the wire. He dipped down and jerked up just right, and it's just kept coming up. And I don't know. I know what that guy next to me, if he ever died in an accident, what he's going to scream like, because we thought we were dead, and he had this Comanche scream that he put on with enough to curdle your blood. And finally that wire popped out over the top of our helmets. I have no idea how, and away we went on a big swing out over the ocean again. And I was like, take me back. And I think that was it. I told my boss, I said, I'm kind of moneyed up. I'm going to go home for a while. I'm lucky to be alive right now.
Dang,
I think that was the last time. But my son flies for Wilson now. So that's pretty cool.
As a lineman?
As a helicopter pilot.
Oh, he's a pilot. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, he came out. We were pulling wire over the Columbia River, and he came out to watch it when he was in school there in Hillsboro. And he's like, I want to do this someday. So, and he did it. So that's pretty cool.
That's not easy. That's not easy to get in at all. I should actually talk to your kid as well.
He was fighting fires for quite a while, and a guy named Ty I had met as a pilot up in Canada. He was working for Wilson, became a really close friend of mine, and he took Trent under his wing and basically got him most of the jobs he had at the beginning of his career. And Trent finally got an interview with Wilson, and I wasn't working with Wilson any longer at that point. And I said, are you sure? I said, that's a little bit more dangerous flying. And he said, oh, it's just like firefighting. He says, there's no difference. So I called Ty and I said, Trent says firefighting and line work are about the same. He goes, he's lying to you. And I said, I thought so.
Dude, I just had Brandon Hill. I said Brandon Hill on the podcast a couple of weeks ago as well. And Brandon was he was involved with a helicopter accident.
I listened to that one.
Yeah, did you? Yeah, doing skid transfers, and was on the bird, and it landed. I think the rotor clipped. He actually has a photo he sent me. I was going to make a social media post about it. It's the moment right before the rotor actually clipped the wire, but the little wing on the tail, whatever it's called or whatever, was up under. You can see the wire up under the wing right next to the rotor, and that was must have been seconds before it actually clipped, and they went down, landed opposite side of the side he was on, and he was pretty messed up from that. So what's your take on speaking up, if you've seen something, say something, like that sort of thing on the crew?
Oh, what's amazing is that people don't, including myself. And I kind of made a little bit of a study out of that. My wife mentioned this. She's in the industry too. She's a project manager for Titan right now. But we were at this retirement party. It's kind of an interesting deal. And at this retirement party was a buddy of mine that retired, and he's a sheriff's deputy. And so there was firefighters there. There were policemen there. There were people there that confronted people for a living. I was there. And I'm trying to get this old grill going, and I'm not sure. It seems like the fire is not hot enough. And I just mentioned it to somebody because I was in charge of cooking the brats. And this old man walks past me, and he reaches down under there, and he says, "Here's a problem." And he goes to loosen that up, and you can hear propane just squirting out all over the place. And I've got fire in there. And he closed it back up, and I kind of thought, well, we got away with that one. And by this time, he's got some other people's attention, and he wasn't happy with whatever it was he was trying to accomplish, and so he did it again. And nobody said anything. In fact, I want to say some of us conscientiously took a step back. And it caught fire, burned his eyebrows pretty good, and burned his forearms pretty good. But it got me and my wife thinking, why wouldn't anybody say something? And it turned out he's a little bit, he's suffering from a little bit of dementia. He's getting older, and he was totally embarrassed about it. And ended up his wife took him home. I felt terrible, but nobody said anything. And I was when I was working in Canada, those dead ends on that DC line were 5,000 pounds. I think they were 30 feet long. It was 4 bundle. We couldn't get a spreader bar to hold. It would hold with positive pressure, but the bolt always broke. There was so much pressure, the bolt broke. So the only thing holding that spreader bar and keeping those insulators tight was the pressure of that hydraulic cylinder. And I was on one side of the tower doing something in the crane, and I noticed the other guys they were hanging some bells, a set of dead ends, and they had monkeyed around with the jack somehow, and it hit that handle on the hydraulic cylinder, and that bell's relaxed. And so they were just hanging there loose on that thing. And I remember thinking to myself, hopefully they don't go jacking on that, because it's going to jack it off the end of that and it'll drop on them. Didn't dawn on me to say something at all. And that's exactly what happened. They dropped 5,000 pounds of bells right on top of them in that crane, and nobody got hurt. It rained glass. So that kind of set me on a path of, we do need to be saying something. And I don't understand what goes on that we don't. I think it's human nature. I think that's how, like, kids get abused and don't say things. People just don't say things, but we sure need to. And I try on my job now to make it cool to talk about that. I write a lot of my own safety topics in the morning, and I get so sick of safety speeches because they're so worn out. And but I try to make it cool to talk about stuff like that, and hopefully we can. I can't imagine being an apprentice. When I was an apprentice, I can't imagine saying something. I know I've seen apprentices put up with some hair-raising stuff because they didn't feel free to say something, but we do need to change that. That's for sure.
I was on a job once. I won't say where it was, but these guys were pulling ropes. So we were pulling wire with wire. So they're pulling wire with this cat. Anyway, they were using a block, and they were using like a steel carabiner to hold between the block and the bottom of the cat so that they could hold down the wire. Anyway, they were holding tension down using the steel carabiner. And a guy got in there. He was in there all day with his head and like just in the bite, like the classic, I see wire doing a V and I'm sticking my head. Like he's sticking his head in there all the time, fucking around, and nobody's saying anything. Well, sure shit, that carabiner peeled straight. Just got too tight. That carabiner broke, went straight. Thing went flying. The block went flying, and come every morning, they had this big safety meeting, 60 guys standing around. Safety guy gets out, gets his bulletin. Well, watch your slips, trips, and falls. There's a little bit of moisture in the air,
Wears me out.
Don't slip on the truck when you're getting on and off, like the same old bullshit.
Yeah.
And we're in the back, like finally there was a group of us just like, how about the thing that happened yesterday? Are we going to talk about that? Like something that we can actually learn from? Oh, no. Well, it's still under investigation.
Investigation. That's the best way to shut everybody up. There was a safety guy in Canada one morning. He said it's 40 below. They were using English terms because most of us are, I guess they're English, American, whatever. I know you guys use a decimal system. So it was 40 below our language. And he goes, at 40 below, bear skin will stick to steel. We all looked at each other, and one guy's like, dang it, I just bought bearskin gloves this morning. But no, that kind of safety talk just drives me nuts. I remember in Kansas City, the guy stood up and says, you know, because you're supposed to put a traffic cone behind your truck down there when you get out. And he says, those orange cones are for directing traffic. So I'm going to see to it that everybody gets a lime green cone to put behind the truck. That was what he brought to the table. But also in Kansas City, there was they called them Triple S, I think. He was Triple S, Lone Lead Lineman, the old sages. And he had somewhere gotten a book, and I'd give anything to have it because it left an impression on me. And I don't know if it was formatted like this, but every day of the week, there was an accident listed that had taken a lineman's life, and he would read that chapter in the morning. And that's a safety meeting to me, you know.
Dang.
I thought that was real. I've looked for that book. I don't know what it was called. I'm not even sure it's formatted the way he was using it, but it sure was great.
That's interesting.
Beats the old the kids are back in school. Watch the school buses like you're going to run over a kid if it's not school time. I don't even understand where some of this stuff comes from. You know,
I think you got to do things that affect that will affect people's behavior. That's what I've
exactly.
It's got to be a deep behavioral change. So you got to reach them in that sort of way. It hits them emotionally, so that they actually decide to change the behavior. So it has to be something think about somebody that's like
a guy a couple years ago, and I was reading the story just yesterday morning. One of my old friends was there. He just signed the books and got on with us. And I'd written this long thing out about the complexity of the system, making it more dangerous. I'm kind of a freak about reading. Reading a book right now called Accidents Are Normal. And I just study that kind of stuff because I actually want to keep people safe, and I don't think what we're doing is making a difference. And so I'm reading this, and I get to the part I want to talk about Tiny's casket underneath his side-by-side, and I start kind of choking up. And I mean, there's, I don't know, 20 or 25 guys standing around me. The last thing you want to do is have a tear run down your face, you know? Yeah. So I kind of skipped over that part. But we do make a more complex system, and the more complex the system is, the more likely it is to break down at various levels. And I think, especially with these younger guys, they get in a buck squeeze. They've never fallen. They've never burned a pole and tried to pick splinters out of them. They might not even know the physics of hitting the ground. And I know that might sound morbid, but you do learn some stuff from the School of Hard Knocks. But you think if you're up there in the pole and you've got your high vis on, you got your hard hat on, and you got your cut resistant gloves, and you got your traffic cones up, and you got nobody's touching the bucket, and you're following all these rules, and you think you're safe, and you're not, because you are responsible for your safety. Nobody else is. You can decide when you swing that hammer, if you miss, where's it going to go? If you're cutting with a chainsaw and you have to pull it out, where's it going to go? And it's stuff like that's the human behavior part of safety that I think could really make a difference. And actually Quanta was starting to do that with their sticky program when I left Patelco, and I thought that was a really good program. You know, this look around this when order turns to chaos, where are you going to be? And I think that's something that can make a difference. Because they said when we were in that meeting with that guy fell off the board here, I guess it was 2019 or something, and he passed away. One of the safety guys from Quanta got up there, and I was amazed to hear him say it because I felt like it was true. I just didn't know it. And he says, we haven't affected the fatality rate of linemen for decades. We've had all these safety programs we've added, and we still got just as many people dying. Now, somebody might say, well, there's a lot more linemen, and that may be true. I don't know the statistics, but if you look at the number of fatalities in our trade for the last 20 years, it's a flat line. And that's amazing considering the amount of money that they have put into safety, especially in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So
100%. Matt has Matt Confer and Duke and the whole team at Quanta have done an amazing job with that. They call it the capacity model.
Yes.
And in a nutshell, for anyone listening that doesn't understand what the capacity model is, it's just when you look around and you see any hazard that might be out there and able to get you, it's like, have you baked in the capacity to fail safe? Because they are not going off this zero rate of incident thing that safety's been pushing around the globe. Like they want zero incidences. They call it right out and they call it for what it is. It's a lie. And it's when you're going to have an accident. You will have an accident, but have you baked in the capacity to fail safely? So that's just sticky model is looking for basically in using the language of linemen. People laugh at the acronym sticky, but it's looking at the shit that can kill you. Like try to find it beforehand, talk about it, find that shit that could kill you, and then deal with it. Does it need guards? Does it need, is it pneumatic? Is it like, what type of energy is it? And then how do you control that energy if it's dispersed in a way that you didn't plan, And it's a great model.
I'd like to revisit the whole thing. And in fact, some of the guys I'm working with now at Titan they're kind of in agreement with some of this stuff, and which really makes me excited that there's open ears about it.
Yeah.
But just the human behavior part, like a tailboard. For some reason, some safety guys got in his mind that if that tailboard's 15 pages long and you open it up and it falls clear down to your foot unfolding, that you've made somebody safe. And what you've really done is force that foreman who's trying to get some work done to fill out all those blanks and give a 2-second actual tailboard because all the guys have been sitting in the truck while he's filling this thing out. And so they're actually starting to record with our company. Some of the linemen are accepting it, some aren't. They said, they've got you. They can prove you didn't say what you said. And there's always a legal aspect. And I don't pretend to know what's right or wrong, but I like the idea of questioning it. I like the idea of trying new things because what we're doing isn't working. I don't think.
I really like that as well. And I like this aspect that you keep talking about, human behavior. It's like humans have made everything. We continue to make things really complex, but human behavior is to actually cut corners. It's not to cut corners. It's to be efficient, right?
Right.
That especially line work. It's, you've noticed it. Like how can we do the least amount of moves to get this job done? Because it's a big job and we're using our bodies to do it. So if we can cut a corner, quote unquote, or, like find a more efficient way to do it, we're going to do it. So somebody was studying that. It's like, if you take a city sidewalk and you go 90 degrees, so you're walking straight and you turn 90 degrees. Well, if there's an opportunity to cut that corner, you're going to cut that corner, right? It's just human behavior. So it's a bigger thing. Like you got to look at everything from the engineering of whatever you're working with or on, the tools, the equipment, the structures, everything, and try to like plan for those ahead of time. Like it's a complex thing. So I'm kind of excited about AI and maybe AI's ability to help predict some of those things, like natural human behavior. Like, hey, I'd predict a 99% chance a human's going to cut this corner. Maybe we can work some sort of safety factor into that. I don't know. That'd be kind of neat. Something to think about.
And I read a book several times actually, and you might enjoy it. It's called Deep Survival. It's a study on who lives and who dies in certain given situations. And one of the stories I told my guys the other day about this 17-year-old girl that was in a jetliner that was hit by lightning and everybody fell out of the sky 30,000 feet or whatever it was into the jungle. And the trees caught a lot of them. And I think there were 11 or 12, something like that, lived. And she was the youngest that lived. And they all landed strapped in their seats. And she remembered that her father had told her at some point that she needed to find a body of river and start walking downstream. That was what she did. And she left everybody there. Everybody that she left died, and she walked herself to safety. And my point to the guys was, you are responsible for your own safety. I don't care how many regulations we have to work under. If we're working for this car company and they want us to dress up like traffic cones, we're going to dress up like traffic cones because that's what they said. But don't think it's going to keep you safe because it's not, And show me how many accidents happen. The guy's like, well, I just didn't see him. I just don't believe that happened. But here we are all glowing in the dark out there. And I think the argument could also be made if you've highlighted everything, nothing's highlighted,
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, you operate inside this system that's been laid out for you, and it's still your responsibility to keep yourself safe. And until you can break yourself free and say something if you see it, like you said, or
or make a decision saying, you know what, I'm not doing that because here's why. And I think then you own your own safety.
Yeah.
You can still get in an accident, but
I've been on a real kick about this whole speaking up thing. I just think it's like, I heard a story like similar, like the plane crash thing made me think of this, but it was a crew resource management conversation or something, CRM. And it was an airplane that was coming into land and kept getting diverted by tower control. I believe this is how it went. Kept getting diverted by tower control to do another lap around because they were having some issues with the runway, and just do another lap and do another lap. And the pilots, everybody on the plane was like, yeah, no problem. Doing a lap. It was just routine that nobody thought to look at fuel. And one of the flight attendants was like trying to mention it to somebody, and the person that she kept going to was like, nope, just stay back. The guys got it. The pilots got it. Everything's under control. She's like, aren't we getting low on fuel? They ended up running out of fuel, crashing, killing everybody, just because of not speaking up, not paying attention to these things, overlooking, anyway, whatever the issues were. But like, talking to Brandon the other day was just a good reminder of, like he even said it himself. He's like, we came in, they dropped us on the tower or on the structure, and it felt close. He felt too close. And he's like, I didn't know this pilot. He was a new pilot for us. It was a new company, a new bird, new pilot. We hadn't flown with him before. Nobody talked to him prior to like getting in on the skid with him. Nobody really talked to this guy. Nobody found out what he was up to the day before, where he came from, who he was, anything. Nobody knew anything about him. Nobody said anything. It felt off. They had comms, and you get back on, and the rest writes itself. And his advice to everybody was, to everyone was like, you get that feeling, or if you see something, just like use your voice, just speak up. It's not stupid. It's not dumb. Don't be insecure. Really just speak up.
The crew that I was with Wilson, because there were a lot of times we were running 2 helicopters at a time. Oh, we did that a lot, and the people that I worked with, I felt like I could say the dumbest thing on the radio, and probably did many times, but you've got the helicopter, he's landed there 100 times. And every once in a while you just get on the radio and say, hey, just remember there's distro there. And without fail, they would go, thank you. And then somebody else would get on, how's the fuel looking? When you're a new guy and you're around a helicopter, the last thing you want to talk to a pilot about is his fuel. Like, that is not my business. But it is if you're on the skid. It's 100% your business,
Or you're standing underneath.
But it was such a great culture there. And my son works there, and he said that there's still remnants of that crew still working, and he said it's still the same way. He said they communicate great. He feels like he's part of the line crew, which is what I would want the helicopter pilot to feel like. I wouldn't want to keep the pilot in the dark. Like of all the guys you want to keep in the dark, that wouldn't be the one,
Totally. I love it because I've talked to hundreds of linemen now. And I remember coming up, even like you take that, like not even around helicopters, but you just take that to the bucket with your bucket partner. And it was constant, like a constant communication. Hey, watch your left shoulder. You getting close, okay, thanks. There was never any of this, like, there was never any ego. There was never any like, fucking shut up. I know, it was no, I appreciate it. Thank you. Notice that, or, watch your second point, or like whatever it was. It was a constant communication between you two, because that's what you're there for. If you're the one working, you're busy doing something. The other one's like handing tools or watching your back, like looking the other direction. Like you're moving wire in the jib. One guy's looking this way, the other guy's looking that way, and you're describing to each other what you're seeing, right? Oh, your sag's looking a little low that side, maybe come this way, whatever the scenario is. But the more I've talked to people, like it's that way for some people, but it's not that way for everybody. Not every line crew runs like that.
I took my crew at Wilson for granted. I mean, we could be pulling, I suppose, 4 miles to 3 miles of wire, a lot of wire, and it didn't matter. Anytime anybody moved with a hoist or was going to slack into the bells or whatever they was doing, we talked all the way down the line. Whoever might be clipping, wherever anybody was, they knew the wire might move. They probably weren't even going to see the wire move, but they knew to expect it and pull their hands back for a second. Then I get with a crew a company that I won't mention in San Francisco, and we're going to pull in or pull out number 6. And I'm up in this bucket with an X100, and they fed it through. I don't have a radio. I can't see a person anywhere around me. I'm extended all the way out. They start pulling this wire. I'm starting to sweat. I don't say a word. I'm like, I'm not going to be the one to chicken out, And sure enough, a bump got caught. Started to pull it. Then I was screaming bloody murder. They heard me before the bucket got pulled over. But yeah, and nobody talked. I didn't know it was going to move. Nobody checked on me to see if I was ready, and so I learned something right then, that not everybody communicates the way that they should, and still was my responsibility not to have put myself in that position. But you grow and you learn,
Yeah.
I was a relatively new guy on that crew, and I didn't want to make a stink, But
Yeah.
I would hope I'm maturing past that at this age.
I believe in over communication. I know there's some people that would be like, okay, I get it. Shut up. Stop talking. But I'd rather them say that than, why didn't you say anything? If you saw it, why didn't you say anything?
Yeah.
You could have saved his life, or you could have done something. Anyway, I'm on a big communication kick right now. And it just seems like a lot of the guests I've been talking to recently have these stories of incidences or a potential incident, and it all come down to like, I saw it, or I had a feeling, or I seen something was off, and I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I know I can be just like yourself. I can be accused of it so many times. I still am, but it's still, I don't know what it is. Like you said, it's a human thing. We just don't like to, it's awkward or something. It's uncomfortable. But
what you said recently does kind of ring true too. I do believe most of us probably are good communicators, and I do believe probably the vast any group that's worked together for a while is going to be good at it. It's going to be a lot better at it. I think maybe the danger comes in when you're throwing crews together out of the hall and people are just starting to work together, as opposed to somebody that almost knows what this guy's going to do before he does it because he worked with him for so long.
See, that spins off into leadership then. And what does a good leader look like? A good leader to me looks like a guy that can straight away create a culture around him of communication. Like, hey, I'm here, I'm your boss, I'm your leader, but don't think that what you have to say isn't valued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first time I noticed a leader, I was at a thing called Boy State they had, where he picked a couple kids and they sent us off to this fake government in Montana. So there's, I think, 50 or 60 senior boys. I think we were seniors. So, the ultimate cool age. And it was right, I'll tell you how old I am. It was right when NASA lost that space shuttle. So shortly after that, there was a bunch of NASA jokes, need another 7 astronauts, stuff like that. And they were all flinging around there in that little BS section we were having. And this kid stands up and says, hey, this isn't funny. These people just died, And man, you could have heard a pin drop. And if you look back over your life, you'll see times when somebody dared. My son-in-law's a lineman. He's a guy that is not afraid of confrontation at all. And it's so refreshing. If you say that, you want to go grab a bite to eat? He'll say no. I'll be like, well, not really, but yeah, I'll go.
God, I love that. That is not me.
So, being a good leader, being able to just, I don't know, be a man. Well, it's amazing in this industry with all of us alpha males that we're all just a little bit pussies sometimes. Nobody will come right out and say something until they get mad enough to fight. Then it's too late, But the act of walking up to confront somebody, and like I had to let somebody go the other day. It felt like I had lead in my boots walking across the lot to go fire at this guy. It's just, I just hate that kind of conversation, but I'm getting more used to it now. But
yeah, you're 100% right. That guy also that, will bitch and bitch and bitch to a group of his homies, but then get in the safety meeting and the safety guy goes, anybody got anything to say? The guy's kicking stones in the back, like, no, I don't know. No, not me, not me. It's like, you had a lot to say 10 minutes ago. Well,
Yep. That's so true. And I wish I could say I'm not like that. I'm sure I've been like that before. Yeah. But
I think
we're all growing, right?
Yeah. Shift gears for a second. When did the music start? What's with the music?
Well, I picked up a guitar, I think first grade, and I think seventh grade I brought it to school, and I found out the girls would sit around, and I was hooked on the guitar from then on. But I did a country music show for a few years in Kansas City, and that's where I kind of started doing some professional stuff, and the band I played with there was just amazing. And then when I moved to Montana, from there, I had a little bit of a bar band, and we traveled around for a little bit. But then when I went on the road, all that just stopped, And as far as the Lineman songs go, I was GFing an inspection crew in Northern California. And by GFing an inspection crew, that means you get up in the morning, hand them maps, and go sit in your hotel room, twiddle your thumbs all day,
Yeah.
And I had my guitar, and I grew up listening to trucker songs. Red Sylvain, C.W. McCall, all these guys that would sing trucker songs, but they would sing them to truckers. They weren't singing them to other people to tell them about trucking. They were singing to truckers using trucker terms that most people wouldn't know. And I'd heard some Lineman songs, and most of them were, oh, we're going to die any day. We're storming the beaches of Normandy, and, I'm leaving my wife and kids, and it's all sacrifice. And I was like, that's not how we are really out there. And so I wrote Coming Up 3 Clicks. I was at the PG&E training facility in California. They got like a dormitory set up there. We were learning how to do something. I don't remember what that particular thing was, but I'd had kind of the idea of this Coming Up 3 Clicks because all that dead ending I'd done. And the guy would always be like, come up 3 clicks, and you'd give him like 9 or 10, He's like, I'm not giving you another 3. But anyway, I kind of got that rolling through my head. And so I sat down that night and I got it all put together and I put it on YouTube. And the next morning I got it, walked out, and I wasn't friends with most of these people, and they're all kind of staring at me. And I was like, what? And they're like, you put that song on YouTube. And like, they'd all heard it already. So I checked YouTube, and it had like 1,000 hits overnight. And so somebody from Canada, I don't know how many names I'm supposed to mention, he hit me up on Facebook, and he's like, you need to write some more of these. And I said, well, you got any ideas? And he starts just flinging them out to me. 2 Block by Noon, or Skin Him with a Dull Knife, or something like that, So I threw all that in the song the next time, and just happened to have enough time to be recording it there in California. There was a recording studio not too far away, and just went and started putting them down and recording them. And now I've got an app with the deal that I use. I can see where they're listening to it, and it's all over the world. It's been in almost every country now, South America, Central America, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And so I've got some more rolling around in my head. I just haven't set them down yet, but I almost feel like it's an obligation now to get some more out. And I would like to get just a little bit better production. Another one of those is Don't Say Anything, even though it's my own dang song, but some of the production on it was a little Yankee, a little hokey, I guess. I wanted a little bit more brutal on some of that stuff than the da 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 that it came out. But yeah, it was just funny. And my wife just can't stand it. Because she knows that's exactly what I want, is people talking about me. It's my favorite subject, So we just the other day, just last night, in fact, I hired this cold apprentice, and he called me and said, well, I got my wife and kids that are in Portland, and I can't really find a spot to stay. I was wondering if anybody had a spot. And I said, if you're not going to kill my family, I said, you can move in here for a couple of days till you get it figured out. And he's like, well, I won't kill you. And I was like, well, that's really nice of you. So he moved in, and I had the guitar sitting there, and I'm just kind of waiting for him to mention it, And my stepdaughter, she picks up the guitar and starts playing it, and he's sitting on the couch. She says, that's pretty cool that you play. So then she gave me the guitar, and she went to get her own because we were going to play a little bit. And he's like, oh, and you play too. And I was like, I went kind of like that, and my wife is like, "Oh my God, here we go," you know. And I said, I don't know if you realize, but I'm kind of a big deal, you know.
I love it. I love it.
So there was somebody at work today. I was telling that story. And they're like, what kind of apprentice doesn't know who Clint Vick is? It's a joke, but it's just music. But it is. We put that song together with the Wilson guys that I worked with, where we did the wire pull through the song. That's kind of an interesting story. I wasn't working with Wilson at the time, but I called Chris Hughes and Bebop and Glenn, and I said, "Hey, I want you to call me." And I said, "Here's the script I want you to read when you leave a message on my voicemail."
That's awesome.
And so they all called in and left all these sayings down, and then we went into the recording studio and cut them together.
It sounds so good. Yeah, it turned out really good.
Bebop, he actually went and got a radio. He was mad because Chris and Glenn didn't get radios. He actually talked into the phone through a radio. But yeah, we cut it together, and everything in there. Chris Hughes had said at one time, you know, when we pulled over the river, he's like, "Yeah, we pulled over everything but a ferret farm." And I remembered that he had said that, so I had him say that. And then I had a guy on my crew in the Dalles. I was always trying to get out of work, and we were working by the airport there, and I think we were spacing. And he's like, "It's too windy to go up there." He wanted to go fishing. "It's too windy to work today, Clint. I don't know if I can go up there." So I'm the foreman. I called Chris, and I was like, "Man, it's kind of windy." I said, "This windsock over here stuck straight out." And he didn't even bat an eye. He's like, "Yeah, that sock's been broke for a long time, you know."
So good. That's so good. It's so good. I love the storytelling in your songs, and it makes sense now. Listening to those trucker songs and then writing line work songs for linemen, like you're talking to linemen. It's because it's
and people that are linemen don't get hardly anything out of them at all.
But every lick in there is exactly, and it's no wonder people listen to them around the world. Like, I've had quite a few conversations with linemen now from all walks of life, all around the world, and we're all the same. We're all the same. All of the same things.
You can almost pick them out of the store. Like my wife will do that. She's like, "That's a lineman right there," you know.
Yeah, totally. Walking by him in the airport, you'll see an IBW shirt or something. You're like, "Yeah, it makes sense."
Yep. And then I had for a while there, I had a bumper sticker on my truck that said something to the effect of "lineman, because even firemen need a hero," or something like that. And I was in the elevator in Vegas, and this guy got in. He's like, "I saw your bumper sticker." And I was like, "Oh yeah?" And he goes, "I'm a fireman." And he's like, talking to my wife, I didn't know what I should say to you. And I was like, "Well, there you go. That's the problem right there, you know."
Talking to my wife, I didn't know what to say to you. That's gold. There's your next song.
Yeah, it probably is. I got to do that. Something about Dragon. I think Dragon is going to be the next one, because everybody wants to drag. And I was talking to a buddy of mine years ago. I said, you know, at some point, you probably need to hook your wagon to something, because you ain't always going to be, you're going to be taking a call. You're going to be the old guy, and they'll be like, "Oh, we got to work with this guy," you know? So the Dragon song is going to go something to the effect of, you know, "I'm not torquing those bolts, I'm dragging," or "It's raining, I'm not working the rain, I'm dragging." And then at the end, he's going to call and say, "Yeah, this is Clint, I'm coming in. You know, I just took a call." And he's like, "What do you mean you're spinning me? You know what? What do you mean you're firing me right now?"
100%. I like it. Wagon and dragon rhyme too.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
That's so dope. In Coming Up 3 Clicks, you talk about heard like one verse in there about Jimmy on the skid. What was that? Was that a real incident?
So that didn't happen to me. Okay. When I was working in Canada, there was a guy that came back, and somebody might correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this to be true. I believe he came back on our crew after an extended time in the hospital from riding down with a helicopter. And the rumor was, and I asked him a little bit about it, that he had broke nearly every bone in his body, even all of the bones in his finger. And that's what made me ask him the question. I said, "How did you break all the bones in your fingers?" And he said, when the chopper started spinning, he grabbed that hoop, and as it spun loose, he broke every bone as his fingers were letting go. And he went out and hit the end of the lanyard, straightened out his pelican hook, and nearly came out of the pelican hook. He hit the end of the lanyard so hard and then just slammed into the ground. And so he came back after telling stories about, they'd roll him over and he could hear his bones rolling around inside of his body when they try to keep him from getting bed sores and stuff like that. And he got right back on the skid. I don't know if it was the first day, but not long after he got back. And I rode out with him. We were clipping, and he got on the arm there, and he was just mortified. He was so scared that I was scared, and I'd been doing it for a year at this time. And he says, I got to get off of here. I said, I don't blame you a bit. And so he got down, but it definitely left an impression on me that he came back and got right on the skid, but no, I've never, that's as close as I've known anybody that's passed away in a helicopter crash. I remember getting on the radio in San Francisco because pilot told me that one of Wilson's choppers that we were using was built out of all the choppers that had crashed for Wilson. And I called Chris again, and I was like, hey, this chopper's been in like a lot of wrecks. He goes, just means it's got experience, bud. You're good. And so,
just got back from Nam.
Yeah. And then one of the lines in there talks about riding to a tower in a tiny fishing boat, and that was a true deal too. Wilson bought like a 10-foot aluminum boat for us to carry all these metal plates in to do tower mods, and we're basically oaring out to these towers in the San Francisco Bay. It was
with a
ridiculous.
boat full of metal splicing plates. Yeah, good.
And so first down this tower, right by this big bridge, and somebody yells at us from the bridge, and we can just barely hear them. And we figured out later that it was a highway patrolman, because we'd rode out there in this goofy little boat and we'd climb this tower. Even though we had our high vis and our hard hats on, he was suspecting something, So pretty soon, the whole bridge is lined with cops, and like part of the sand where we parked was lined with cops, and we've got a helicopter circling around, and he's like, go down. They're talking, the CHIPS helicopter, the California Highway Patrol helicopter is talking to us. And so my foreman, I was like, what are we going to do? Because we're up there. And at this time the tide had dropped, so our boat couldn't hardly go back. There wasn't enough water. And so finally he yells down, he says, see if you can get that down boat to the shore and talk to those guys. Well, he took off, and he's just squirting mud out from behind the boat as he went over there. Finally got him talked down to. They had apparently called PG&E, and PG&E said they didn't have anybody working on that line. There was a mistake made somehow. But later on, I was telling my wife about it. I said, this chopper was circling and talking to us. I said, I was kind of worried they were going to start shooting rubber bullets at us. And she's like, they thought you were tearing down the tower. Why would they use rubber bullets? That was my first experience to get talked to from a CHIPS helicopter in California.
Dang, man. That's freaky too, because you guys open fire for no reason sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not in California, but
Lineman's lives matter, thank God.
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. Girlfriend's truck, where'd you write that?
So that was the wife number 2. I was going through a divorce after being married for 10 years. This is, I don't think I was a lineman yet. No, I wasn't. I was flat broke doing concrete. And she had bought this fancy truck. And we pulled up to this restaurant, and I got out, and one of our friends met us, and they go, so I don't think we were married at the time. And so this gal's like, her truck, your truck, our truck. And I was like, it's her truck. That's what started that song.
That's dope.
And that's one of the ones that the production, I really want to redo the production on that.
I think it's great.
Yeah, it could sound a lot better for sure.
That's cute, kid.
So that's a true story about a guy named Drew that I work with at Wilson. He's pretty much a brother to me now. We worked a lot together, and been at each other's families and stuff like that. But he came to see us. I think him and a guy named Isaiah came and helped me trim some trees in my backyard. And my neighbor said he was worried these trees were going to fall on his house, and he wanted me to get some tree trimmers. I was like, well, we don't need tree trimmers, So they came, and of course we're on the road all the time. So I'm home. I'm not about to go out with the boys when I'm home. So I'm in bed with my wife at 2 o'clock in the morning. The phone rings, and it's Drew. And he's like, you probably ought to come get me. I was like, where are you? And I forget the name of the bar he was at, but he's like, I'm surrounded by a bunch of guys, and they're pretty mad, and I don't know where Isaiah's at. So I told my wife, I said, I got to go. And so went and got him. And as he got home, I think he was having a little stomach issues there when I finally got him back to the house. And he says, I told him, he said, they just got around. They said, we're loggers. And I was like, that's cute, kid. That's where that came from.
Do you write these things down? Do you write them down like when you hear something like that?
Something, especially music, like anytime anybody in my life has mentioned, I really like that song, that just sticks in my head. It always has. And I've also written a book. Like, I like to write. I like to affect people's emotions. And when somebody says something like that, like he recently said another one, he just texted me something. He's like, I'm not a cactus expert, but I can sure spot a prick when I sure know a prick when I see one, or something like that. And I was like, that's pretty funny too.
That's a song title too.
Yeah. But no, I I heard a guy one time say that, he said, some mornings I get up and my job today is to write a song. And I wish I could do that. I get up and I just get frustrated. And like, you take Red Solo Cup, for instance. If I'd have written that, I'd have thrown it in the garbage can. And the guy made $1 billion off of it, you know. But I got this probably messed up idea. And it's funny because in my app, I can go through and see which songs I've been listening to the most. And the one that I'm most proud of, Winning the Wire, is one of the least popular ones. But the goofy one, 2 Block by Noon, and That's Cute Kids, that's the one that people like. Maybe it's because of the style of music it is, I don't know, or the fan base or whatever. But
I think it probably hits just a different chord with people too. Like they can probably relate, like instantly think of every time I've ever been 2 blocked, or called it out on somebody else, been walking by. I'm like, he's in trouble. He's re-rigging that one for sure.
Or knowing that he's going to get in trouble and watching see it happen.
Yeah.
No, I was working with a guy today. I was talking to him, and I was telling him that story about The Apprentice in my house, and he goes, yeah. He said, I'm constantly scanning TikTok now. He goes, I'm scared to death you're going to write a song about me. And so
that's dope. You should get these on social. You should get these on TikTok. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I put some of them down. It was funny. I thought I was going to make all this money. I'd put them on YouTube when I'd write them, and then when I'd get them recorded, I'd want to kind of funnel people to buy them. And so I would take it off of YouTube. But people really liked they just liked the big old ugly guy sitting there with a guitar. I guess it's just the authenticity, maybe. I don't know, but as opposed to what an old cowboy used to call the canned music, but and it turns out I don't make that much money anyway, so it didn't matter.
I think
you get like
a
quarter of a penny every time somebody listens to it or something like that.
I think it's dope. You should keep doing it. You should you need to get out on the road or get the full album together or something. I think
I need to do something like that. I do have, like I said, I've got some more rolling around in my head. It's a little bit of a deal to find a recording studio that you can just go in. And now with the way the music trend is, it might just be me and my guitar. Maybe that's the way I need to go. But to find a recording studio that's kind of got like a band for hire that'll come in,
Gotcha.
Like that one, makes sense. The engineer did all the harmonizing and everything on it. And he was like this California hippie. And if I had known better, like one of the songs that I would have been the most proud of was Miss Her, Missing Me. And in my head, when I wrote that song, I could hear like more of a Merle Haggard sound. So when I go to pick up this thing after they're all done mixing it and producing it, and I hear this like, what he put on there. I forget what. Oh, he put the accordion on there. And I was like, oh, no, this is horrible. And that, so, and he didn't know. And of course, it would have cost money to get it changed. So that's just the way it went out. But so getting the production to sound the way that you would want it to sound is something I'm going to shoot for a little bit more next time. And maybe it'll be just me and the guitar. But I do need to get some more written down for sure.
That's interesting. So it's like tough to find a recording studio and find a producer that you can work with that kind of gets your vision and it can
Right.
actually. I
Well,
never
if
thought. I
you,
never thought about that aspect of it.
have
Like
you ever
actually,
heard of Jerry Reed?
yeah, I think so.
So at the end of, he did a lot of songs like he got, she got the gold mine, I got the shaft,
Yeah.
or so he does these songs, and at the end there'll be some guitar riffs, and he'll be talking and just kind of riffing, talking. And I wanted to do that at the end of Coming Up 3 Clicks, and I said,
Mhm.
so I said all this stuff, and I said I want that to go over the top of the music, and he had never heard anything like that in his life. He didn't know what I was trying to
Gotcha.
accomplish. And so you can just barely hear me saying, the dragonflies are biting or something like that. But if I was to go back, I'd say, no, listen to this song. Listen to how this guy's talking over the music. That's more what I was looking for. So yeah, so much of what you hear is when you see it's produced by so-and-so, it makes a difference.
Mhm.
What somebody's musical background, what they've heard before and everything.
Super interesting. I'm just reading a book, Rick Rubin's book. Just kind of got into it. His new book on creativity. It's super good. And Rick Rubin, like, one of the greatest producers of all time. Super, super creative guy. Anyway, it's a cool book. That never occurred to me. Like, yeah, you've written songs, you can play guitar, you can sing, but to get a whole band to finish, put the piece together and actually
Make it
produce
sound
it.
like you hear it in here.
Yeah.
One of my heroes was Chris Ledoux, and I listened to one of his band members get interviewed one time, and he sat down with him. And he says, that sound when you're out in the yard or out in the pasture, and this bee buzzes by, and then the wind kind of blows and whistles a little bit in the grass. He goes, that's what I hear in this music. And they're like, we have no idea what this guy's talking about. But it's so hard to get what's in here audible out here. And I've been in that music, a lot of that failed. I think the closest one probably is you see I Am a Lineman. That's Cute Kid. I think that's probably the closest one to what I was actually hearing in my head as far as the sound. Wind in the Wire turned out pretty good too. I actually stuck a microphone down inside of a slinky to get that sound with that wire.
Oh, neat.
I had that slinky in my truck for a long time, but I was trying to figure out how to make that sound, and I tried to get some people to record it on their phone when they were up there, because if you worked on the dead end before, if you tap that, you get kind of that laser sound before they get the spacers in and all those stuff. They're all slapping together. I thought that was a cool sound, and I was trying to recreate that. It's close. It's not right on, but of course the guy at the studio had no idea. Like, it would take a half hour to try to tell these guys what I'm even up to.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's so cool though. Well, I hope you find somebody. Heck, I want to help connect you with somebody now. I'd love to hear these things produced. I think it's so cool.
And I think it's probably if it wasn't for the pain, because I'm a real quitter. I've got a lot of quit in me. So, but if something comes a little easier, especially in music where you can really have fun doing it, it would probably generate a lot more material,
For sure.
Well,
yeah, that's cool. I like the storytelling aspect of it. I'm a storyteller at heart as well. Is one of the reasons I started this podcast was really just to tell line stories. Just once I started to accumulate these stories for myself, they're just cool, right? You meet unique people and you do really cool work, and you do it all over the world, and it's cool to talk about and tell, just pass them down. So that's, I feel like you do that in your music too. So
I've had people call me on Facebook in the middle of the night. We'd be like, we're down here in Georgia, sitting around the campfire, just listening to your song. We just wanted to call and say hi. My wife would be like, who is that? So I don't know. Totally. I never met him.
That's so dope.
It is. It's cool. It's. I like to act like I got a big head, but I feel blessed to have contributed something that might make a small flare in the trade, But
it's neat because, one of the most popular stories in line work is Slim the Lineman, and I've met Bill Haynes Jr. I've tried to get him on this show. I've met him in person a couple of times, but he's 90. I want to say he's 95 now, 95, 97. still competes in triathlon. So his father wrote Slim the Lineman. He's from Southern California. I just saw him on Facebook the other day, just competed in a triathlon. He's like, slow, old, like I come in way last, but I'm the only 95-year-old out there. And I just think it's so freaking cool. So you think about these old stories, like Slim the Lineman was written a long time ago, and High Tension was the other book that he wrote, the other story that he wrote. And it presents our job, our industry, our trade, our craft, whatever. It presents it in the form of that day and that time and that era, and it encapsulates it. And now we're 100 years, in the future, and we're listening to it, we're watching it. And I kind of remember going through line school. We watched that thing every second day. We put that movie on, when nobody was around or we had a break, we'd throw Slim the Lineman on while we're sitting eating lunch at line school, right? Just because it's so unique, it's cool. And that was kind of like my hope with this pod as well. Like, it's for now. Sure, it does something now. It's some culture now, but it's like, we're talking about the trade as we lived it now. And,
that's interesting.
We're sharing things, and like, what does it look like if it's available for people to listen to 100 years from now when I'm gone? Or, even if it's only for my kids, like, my grandfather passed away fairly early. He was a storyteller, and I was young when he passed away. So I don't know much about, 2 generations ago in my family, because people aren't storytellers. They don't, talk, but they never dove into where my family lineage comes from. Like, why am I a tradesperson? Why is my dad a tradesperson? Like, why was his father a trades? Like, is it a long line of like tradesmen? What else did they do? Like, I don't know, but my kids there's a good chance they're going to know. There's over 100, hour and a half conversations on the internet where I'm talking just about like what I did for a living, and you really get to know a little bit of like who I was and who I am. And even if it's just for them, I think that's freaking cool. So
I think that I don't know if you might have actually sat down and thought about it. A lot of people don't sit down and think about things, but stories of who we are now is so important. The narrative of our life, where we came from and where we sit in historical perspective, it becomes so important. And I've probably got 70 history books on my phone I listen to on Audible. And one of the things they did in the Soviet Union was take all of that away. They took all of the history away. They took every meaningful thing out of your life. They took it away. And we preserve that in stories, and it's vitally important. And without, you can make fun, you can believe in God or not believe in God, but what you can't do is argue the effect that religion has on a people, a solid something to believe in.
Yeah.
And if you know who your dad was and your child knows who you are, that's important. It's a deep subject, but it is really important, I think.
We communicate in stories too, right? Like that's how human beings have communicated. That's still how we communicate. If you pay attention to the creator world, like TikTok or YouTube or like whatever it is, they talk about meaningful posts, like a meaningful post or a meaningful video or a meaningful anything song that you write. It's story driven. It's story. Like the ones that do the best, the ones that like get you, affect change, create emotion, whatever. It is a story. It's got a 3-act narrative. It's got some conflict resolution in it. It's a story. Those are the most meaningful things.
And it needs a hero, I think. I grew up listening to the Marty Robbins music, the old cowboy ballads too. Most of the songs I learned how to play on the guitar, the guy dies at the end. And I used to catch crap from that, from people like, every song you sing, the guy dies at the end, But yeah, most of the songs I do are stories, and that's one way that I remember the words, remember the lyrics, because that's just what comes next. These songs that kind of ramble around and talk more esoterically, I can't memorize them because I don't know what's coming next. But with a story, I always know
Yeah.
But yeah, I love telling stories. I like to either watch in the crowd, whether it be around a campfire or a couch or in a big auditorium, and see somebody either tapping their foot or crying or laughing. I want to feel something. And I think that's what I get out of when I sing to somebody. I want them to feel something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it, man. Yep. And it's like, it's passing down. There's lessons within it as well. Like even in your music, in your songs, in your writing, there's lessons. So like I usually ask my guests, like what's your take on passing down to the next generation? What should the next generation be learning? And for me, it's like presenting that through this podcast. It's through my voice. It's through connecting with other people who've had these experiences, and I talk about them and I put it out there for people to want to listen to it. And the same thing for your music, like through storytelling, you're passing down the lessons of the trade or knowledge of the trade or the way it's being executed over this generation in your music. That, it has a right, it has a place.
You made it sound really important. Now you're making me feel guilty for not doing more of it.
Good. Awesome. Awesome. All right, buddy. I've had you for an hour and a half. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely. I usually have this last little sequence. It's kind of like a silly finish my sentence. So I just ask a question and then just like answer the question in like kind of as short as you want to answer. And
okay.
Yes.
I'm nervous now.
No. Easy one then. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice that you'd give yourself?
Life is long.
Mm-hmm.
Life is short and life is long. Leave the doors open. If you're going to start closing doors, you're going to remove opportunities. I think if you leave the doors open, you still have a lot of choices. You can still make choices, but if you start closing doors through bad choices, you limit the direction your life can go later on. Maybe you don't limit it, but you definitely make it harder.
I love that. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and you just brought it up. Is the patience thing. People today don't want to play long ball. They just want everything snappy, like expect everything to happen, overnight success, like I made one post or something and it went viral and I'm famous now, or I got into the line trade, or how come they're not hiring me? And it's like you've tried 5 times. Like how about try 50 times or 150 times, or try for 5 years? Like play a little bit of long ball. Like you said, life is long. It's short, but it's also long. Give it some time and be patient.
Teacher when I was in high school. I tried out back then they had a show called You Can Be a Star, and I sent in a recording. Well, I can't even imagine how bad it really was, but got back the letter saying thanks but no thanks, and I showed it to this teacher. I thought he was a pretty good mentor, and he always wrote in this big calligraphy, I think is what you call it. He said he took that piece of paper and he's like, first rejection, he gave it back to me. He was, you're gonna get a lot more. Keep fighting,
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so cool. All right. You're a history buff. If you could go back and have coffee with one person, one historical figure, who would that be?
I think because we're a lot the same, we're somewhat the same in some areas. I think it would be Ben Franklin, because I think he was kind of a woolly character, but he was also a really deep thinker. I think he liked to kind of maybe chase the ladies a little bit. I've read quite a bit on him, and he liked to write, and I like to write. He faked his age to start writing in a newspaper when he was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that.
Interesting.
But to sit and talk to a man that would go out in a lightning storm and try to catch a bolt of lightning, I'd like to sit and visit with that guy.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. Cool. If I wasn't a lineman, I'd be...
Well, I was always going to be a singer, so I didn't pay attention in school, didn't finish my math. So
it's all right. There's smarter people out there for math.
You got to be a good singer, and you got to be good looking, and I fell a little bit short in both those categories.
Oh, come on now. I think you nailed at least one.
At least one.
What's the saying? Mom always said, the perfect face for radio.
Yeah, exactly. And it's getting more perfect for it all the time.
Awesome. What's the most valuable tool in a lineman's kit?
Experience.
Nice.
Experience. We're losing it, I think. But I do see these young, and like I call them kids too. They've all got their own families and everything, but they look like kids to me. But you wonder, are they going to pass that along? Are we going to continue the tradition that we have, I believe, done very well at is saying, hey, here's where I messed up once. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I hope the litigation that, like you said, we can't talk about it because it's under investigation. I've been noticing that sneaking in more and more all the time, and I hope we can get around that. But yeah, experience for sure. What other substitute would there be for what we do?
Love it. Okay, last one. Best piece of advice you've ever received as a lineman?
As a lineman.
Or in life?
I had when I was an apprentice, we were rubber gloving, and I don't know if you guys probably hot stick there, and you're in Alberta, right?
In BC,
we went, BC, excuse me.
Yep.
We went rubber gloving as soon as we turned hot there. I was in the bucket, and it sounds simple, but it's kind of rings true through life. And the guy's like, "Do you want a little bit more cover?" And I was like, "No, I'm good, because I'm a cowboy, you know." And I caught 7,200 in the rib cage, and kind of screamed a little bit, and he's like, "What'd you learn?" And I said, "I learned if you ask me if I want more rubber, the answer is yes." So
true story.
The advice is, and one old guy, he's passed away now, but his rule was, if you want more rubber, I'll get it for you, but if I want more rubber, you're going to put it up. And that was the rules of his crew, and I like that.
I like it. I like that a lot. Yeah, mine was, when I got asked that question, it was super simple too. It's just keep your fingers inside the bucket. I've seen a guy lose his finger from it. It's so simple. And I didn't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, Clint, appreciate your time. Thanks for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciated it.
All right, guys, I hope you got some value out of the episode. I really enjoyed recording that. It was so nice to meet Clint. I hope you get over and follow, subscribe, all of his stuff, follow his music, push him to create some more stuff because I think he's super rad. Also going to ask that you follow, support, subscribe, all that good stuff to Powerline Podcast. We'll see you in the next one. And on our way out, we got another song from Clint. Peace.
Now we've all met the man who will never make a hand. He ain't learned a thing since his first day in the yard. He ain't smart enough to bump his head, and we're all shocked that he ain't dead. And his driveway don't go clear to his garage. He's skinning with a dull knife, been that way his whole life. We tell him not every man can do this job. He says just sit back and watch this house. He might learn one day, but not too soon. He's in a 9-line bind, 2 blocked by noon. He lives his life like a hammer, just searching for a nail. He breaks everything he's close to but his pride. Every job gives him the shakes, like he's knee-deep in rattlesnakes. The struggle bus is all we let him drive. He's skinning with a dull knife, been that way his whole life. We tell him not every man can do this job. He says just sit back and watch this house. He might learn one day, but not too soon. He's in a 9-line bind, 2 blocked by noon. Now he's not a lazy man, he's running at the bell. He's not afraid to work, it's just a word that he can't spell. he should have been washed out. It's obvious that he's got his wires crossed. One thing I know is true, if we all make it through, one day I'm sure he will be our boss. But he's skinning with a dull knife, been that way his whole life. We tell him not every man can do this job. He says just sit back and watch this hoss. He might learn one day, but not too soon. He's in a 9-line bind, 2 block by noon. He's in a 9-line bind, 2 block by noon.